I am so excited about today's canning session here. One of my favorite things to keep on the shelf is pot roast. I love pot roast. I grew up eating pot roast all the time, and it was, I don't know, it's always been one of my favorites. But today we're gonna step it up a notch. I was watching Brian Lagerstrom. Don't know if I pronounced that right, I hope I did. Brian Lagerstrom the other night. If you don't know who he is, I'll link his channel below. He is so entertaining, and he is a brilliant chef, and he makes the most delicious food. So he was making his Boeuf Bourguignon at home, or beef Burgundy at home. And I'm not gonna do exactly that, but I am gonna take some of the bits and pieces of his recipe and add it to mine, and I think it's gonna be a wonderful thing to have on the shelf. So I hope Brian is watching, although I'm pretty sure he's not. Welcome to Grow and Preserve. I'm Carter. I'm so glad you're here today. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm gonna use a Pinot Noir because Brian used a Pinot Noir, so it must be good enough. This just came from Costco. I think it was $10. I don't know anything about wine, but it smells good. So I'm gonna put this in my dish here. Smells really good, actually. Okay, and I don't usually get this fancy for home cooking, but Brian did it, so I'm gonna do it. We're gonna add a Mirepoix. I've just roughly chopped these vegetables because we're gonna strain them out later, but I do want the flavor to go in there. I'm gonna put this on a little bit and we'll let the alcohol cook out, and then I'll start adding our bone broth. One thing Brian didn't have that I do have is my homemade bone broth. This is a great gelatinous bone broth. If you watch the video, I'll link it up here. I just posted it a couple of weeks ago. This is bone broth run number 2. So if I were just making this for dinner tonight, I would use run number 1 to get all that beautiful flavor. But this is gonna cook down a good bit more. It's gonna can. So I also want the wine to come through. So I think the bone broth number 2 is the right one to use for this, for canning. All right, so the meat I'm using this time is almost 7 pounds of chuck roast. This just came from Costco. It was $35. Normally, you know, I would use the stew meat from Costco, but they didn't have any. This is the second time in a row they haven't had any. So chuck roast will be divine. I mean, a lot of it is the same anyway. So I'm gonna use that, and I'm gonna get it cut up into pieces that will fit in my jar. And then the other star ingredient, Brian did not have any onions in his final dish. Normally a beef Burgundy or Boeuf Bourguignon, you know, French and Southern don't really come out sounding quite as sexy as they do when it's just French. But anyway, normally they use the pearl onions. You know, I can't find any pearl onions here. So I'm gonna use regular onions because that's what I use in my pot roast. And then the other thing Brian did, which I liked, is that he didn't can the rest of the, or he didn't can it at all, but he didn't cook the rest of the vegetables as long as he cooked the beef. So he used carrots and mushrooms and just kind of threw those in at the end as he was getting ready to serve it, and he was just reducing the sauce down. I like that idea. I'm not a big fan of carrots and mushrooms, but I would use other vegetables that way. So if you want to go ahead and put your carrots and mushrooms, or carrots and potatoes, or whatever you want to put in, if you want to make this more like pot roast, feel free to go ahead and do that. Mine is just going to be meat and sauce and onions. So I'm going to fill my meat maybe halfway through, a little bit of onions, or halfway up, and then the onions, and then fill the rest with sauce because I want plenty of extra sauce to reduce down to make it nice and thick and creamy like Brian's sauce when it's time to cook it. All right, let's get started chopping on this. All right, I'd forgotten to throw my garlic into that pan, so I just did that as well. And I'm just gonna cut this into some pieces that will fit into the jar. I'm gonna put these on the pan. I put down some avocado oil, flop these around a bit, cover them in avocado oil, and then put them in the oven at 500. Also, as I mentioned, I've cut up some onions, very rough cut on some onions, because those I'm going to put in the jar, but I am going to roast those first as well. That is too big. I'd like to get 7 jars out of this. I don't think I'll get 7 jars. Let's call it 6 quarts out of this. Actually, I'd like to use the electric pressure canner, so I'd like to get 5 quarts out of this. But we'll see. All right, I'm gonna get this turned over in the avocado oil. Get it seasoned up. A little salt and pepper. And then I'll chop up the rest of this beef and get it in the other oven. Right. All right. Took a little bit of pepper over this. Teaspoon and a half. All right, same thing with the salt. I'm gonna get this in the oven at 500 and keep an eye on it. I move the onions, a squirt of avocado oil, and toss them in the oven as well. These, of course, won't take as long as the meat, but I do want them a little toasty. Okay, my wine has reduced by half. I'm gonna get the bone broth in there. Let those vegetables continue to soften up. I remember in the bone broth video, I took great efforts to strain out all the bits and bobs. That's why. These jars are clean. There's no gunk floating around in the bottom of them. Well worth the time and effort. Okay, I'm going to turn this down to a simmer, and we're going to start getting our seasonings in here. Start with a little rosemary. Tablespoon of dried rosemary. If I had fresh, I'd use it. A couple of bay leaves. Just throw some thyme in there. Maybe a teaspoon and a half. Pepper. Maybe a teaspoon. Salt. Another teaspoon. Now, in my normal pot roast, I would put in crushed tomatoes, but Brian used tomato paste. So I'm going to use that. That was maybe a third of a can left over from another recipe. So I'll leave that for now, and then we'll see. I have another can open over here. Need it. Now I want to put in some balsamic vinegar. We're on to my pot roast version now. We've strayed a bit from the beef Burgundy. So this is a half a cup measure. I'm going to put in about a quarter cup. And some Worcestershire. Sure, this doesn't belong in beef Burgundy. Put in half a cup of Worcestershire. Sorry if you can hear my water bath canner over there. I have steak sauce going. That will be done by the time we come back. really good. I'm gonna go ahead and add some more tomato paste. So that's another half a can. And I'm adding some more salt. Another teaspoon. All right, first tray of meat is out of the oven, looking fantastic. I'm gonna put the meat in a dish to sit and wait for the sauce. And then I'm going to scrape up all these little bits on the pan, loosen them with a little bit of water, add that to our sauce that's brewing. Okay, the sauce that we're going to use is excellent. It is so good, I can't even tell you. So I'm thrilled with that. Now I'm gonna get it strained out. And then we'll squish some of these vegetables down, make sure we get everything they have to give us. I may have to add another quart or so of beef broth to get as much sauce in each jar as I'd like, but we'll see. I have plenty. Tip this now. Oh, it's gonna be close. Put those pan drippings from the beef in this. So there's a little bit of fat in here. It's going to be so good. All right. Let's get this out of the way. All right, so the onions are also done. And I have 5 jars. And I'm going to put a little bit of broth down in the bottom of each one to help prevent any air gaps or air bubbles. We'll of course go through and debubble before we put the lids on, but we're going to start like this. The sauce smells so good. All right, let's get some beef in here. Now let's see what it's going to take to get it in here. Oh, that was fine. So I'm expecting that when I go to serve this, each quart will serve 2 people, maybe with a little bit of leftovers, or maybe just a really hungry David. All right, we'll leave that one alone for now. I'm putting the biggest pieces in the bottom. I don't have to do as much maneuvering. That is not working for me. You know what? Maybe 5 quarts will be good. that's a better quantity there. So let's take a little bit of one of these. Okay, let's put the onions on top. Want 1-inch headspace. So the onions, the meat, the broth, everything 1 inch or below. Okay. I want to see if I can pour this rather than use my metal utensil there. It's hot. I don't know if we're gonna make it. Just a little bit more. I think I'll open a pint. All right, let's debubble these and then I'll top them off. I'm going to use the tomato paste knife to do this, but you really should not use metal. Risk breaking the jar. Man, this smells good. So the first jar I do, I'm going to try Brian's method. And we'll reduce the sauce and then cook some veggies lightly in the reduction as it's reducing. I think that would be just delicious. I'm thinking this would be really good with some butternut squash. And then maybe some bright, fresh broccolini on the side. All right, so let's look at how gorgeous this is going into the canner. See the onions and the meat floating around? It's beautiful. You know, whenever you cook the meat first, it always comes out a better looking jar in the end. But, okay, these are going in. This was restaurant quality, absolutely no doubt. Not even Brian would suspect that this came out of a jar. I hope you're going to give this a try, because this was truly a fantastic meal for a Sunday dinner or entertaining friends. I took a quart of this and put it into a wide bottom saucepan to reduce. I dropped my potatoes in some boiling water and I made my side salad, and the whole thing came together in 15 minutes. It was perfect. My sauce reduced just like Brian's. I did not have to add, of course, any gelatin or anything because I used my second run bone broth that had plenty of gelatin in it. It came out just like you see here. It would be wonderful if instead of potatoes, perhaps you used a risotto or some pappardelle pasta or even some egg noodles. This really is the star of the show. 1 quart, I think, will easily feed 3 adults, possibly 4 adults. It's very rich, so you could certainly get away with serving a little less meat depending on what you put on the bottom. I hope you'll give this a try. And I hope you will subscribe. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.